this brief Bible dive with beautiful Savior Lutheran Church in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and with me, Pastor Nick. We're in a series of brief Bible dives where we're summarizing books of the Bible so that you can get a quick understanding of the message that each of them contain. Today we're talking about the book of Judges. I'll say right now, the book of Judges will keep you awake. It's filled with murder, intrigue, sex, heroic saviors, dastardly villains, anything that you'd want in like some good action thriller. It contains stories about the rise and fall of tribes and nations in most dramatic ways. And specifically, it contains a cycle of rising and falling of the Jewish people. Before explaining a little bit more of the book, though, I do want to explain and define the term judge. Because when we think of a judge, we probably think of someone presiding over a legal case. Some of the 12 judges in the book of Judges actually would settle some legal disputes for people, but not all of them actually did this as far as we can tell, at least not what's recorded within the book. See, the Hebrew word that we translate as judge in this case also has a tone of the word deliverer. So these 12 judges throughout the book were 12 leaders who delivered the people from their enemies through each of these cycles of ups and downs. They were often more like military leaders then than legal or scholarly leaders. Which of course can be confusing to modern ears since we use the word judge to describe the role that each of them play. The book right before Judges is the book Joshua, and Joshua was about Moses' successor who led the people into the promised land and settled them there, overcoming many enemies in the process. But then this book that follows, Judges, takes place right after Joshua had died, and without his leadership, the people fell away from God at an almost habitual rate. The book spans about 3 centuries, so from about 1375 BC, when it's estimated that we guess that Joshua probably died about that time, and then it goes till about 1050 BC, which is right before Saul became the first king of the Jewish people. Tradition holds that these stories were widely shared amongst the people, but then they were compiled into a single form by the prophet Samuel. And this lines up pretty well with a line that repeats frequently throughout the book. One example is, quote, "In those days when there was no king in Israel." So whomever was compiling this, it was at a time right after or definitely after in one way or another the period without the kings. The book of Judges tells of the people doing well, and then how they would take pride in their success and start believing that they were the source of their own enrichment and worshiping foreign gods, and then they drift away from the true living God. And then as a result, they fell apart as a people, which led them to being taken advantage of by their enemies. The people then would need a leader, and this leader would be a judge. Who would call the people back to God. And after the people faithfully did that, they would triumph over their enemies once again. Well, what would happen? The people would once again become strong and again think that they, not God, were the source of their own strength, and the cycle would repeat over and over and over again for 300 years. Some of the names of these judges may be a little more familiar to you than others. But in chronological order, they're the following: Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. So as I read some of those names, some might be really not familiar to you, but some might be more familiar. You might recall when you heard the name Deborah, you might recall stories of Deborah leading people into battle, stories about Gideon and the fleece, stories about Samson and Delilah. And by far, these were not perfect people, really far from perfect in some cases. But as we see in the book of Judges, God chooses whomsoever God chooses. In these cases, God chose just the right people to save God's people from their enemies at that time. The book, to be blunt, does not paint a great picture of God's people, which is actually one of the reasons that supports the historical accuracy of the events that are contained within it. Because you see, if somebody was making up these stories, that person would probably put the people in a little bit better light than they actually were. The opposite is the case here. All the goodness and all of the flaws are laid right on the table for everyone to see. The book of Judges tells of an unfaithful people, but a perfectly faithful God who loves the people even after they repeatedly turn away from God and do what is right. It tells of a God of mercy who gives a second chance, and then a third, and then a fourth, and so on. So that's the book of Judges in a nutshell. To learn more about our congregation, Beautiful Savior, our website is bslcmi.org. We'd love for you to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course share this video with someone that you think might want to learn more. Get a snapshot of the book of Judges. Now go love God and love your neighbors.